Hello everyone, how you guys doing? Hopefully you're having a wonderful day. Today we are here with a video on a warning about the World Cup for 2026 and why maybe we should tamper expectations just a wee bit. Obviously lately, I've had a series of few, I'd say pessimistic videos, but maybe realistic videos. We'll talk about that more as we sort of get on into this, but with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So of course this stems from the World Cup being hosted in 2026 in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, the host nation as you can see here, and the host cities primarily in the USA, but does branch outside of that as well. And with that, a lot of people are excited because that means Americans are going to be watching soccer, that means Americans are going to be buying soccer cards, that means the cards you own are going to go up in price, theoretically, and that means you're going to be able to make tons of money. At least that's what people tend to think. And I want to go ahead and caution people on that. I think a lot of people have this intuition that Americans are fat, dumb, and ugly. This is just a picture I found. Probably fat and dumb would be one, maybe ugly too, I don't know. It's all personal opinion. Obviously, a little bit of an exaggeration, but the primary part is that they also like cards. So they are dumb, they like cards, and thus they are going to buy your cards because they're going to find out about soccer, they're going to need soccer cards, they're going to buy your soccer cards, and that is an easy, foolproof way of making good money. At least it's, again, some people's sort of logic going into this. I, however, don't tend to see it the same way. I think that we're probably smarter, or at least, a little bit smarter than you give us credit for. I also think you underestimate how little we care about soccer in the grand totality of things, and I'm going to go ahead and give my rationale as to why I don't think that that's the case. So, of course, as always, I do like to go ahead and throw out a few things before we dive on into it, just to preface the rest of this video in some sort of standing. I want to start by saying I love soccer cards. I think that soccer cards long-term are sort of a great card to go ahead and collect and own more than likely. I think that being able to buy some of the, best cards in the world, of the biggest sport in the world, for a massive discount relative to US sports is not a bad thing. I personally enjoy it. That's why I'm here. That's why I do this stuff. I both enjoy it, but also think that it could be a decent store of value, especially in comparison to American sports. Now, cards in general, risky asset. All of this is very speculative. Don't risk more than you're willing to lose. All that fun stuff. We'll talk about how this isn't financial advice here in a bit, but you get the idea. Second, I love newcomers. I want to welcome newcomers to the hobby. I think that the people that have come in over the last few years, happy to have you. That's why I also would like to educate and maybe, shine different perspectives out there. And that's why I make content in this space. It's not one that honestly gets much content at all outside of, the occasional breakers that are trying to get you to buy product or funnel you their way for that reason. I mean, there's not a lot of people that genuinely just make content about soccer cards because they enjoy it. They're starting to sprout up, and I'm very happy about that. I'd love to see more and more because I enjoy also consuming the content. Along with that, I do mean well. When I say, warning people about this isn't to incite fear. This isn't to tell people that this isn't the space for you. It's just that I want people to be a bit more thoughtful about how they go about all this and maybe not assume that this is a pump and dump that they're going to be able to throw onto dumb Americans again. And then finally, no investment advice. I'm just a random guy on the internet yelling at a microphone, and you probably should consult with people that, have certifications and do smarter things with money and all that fun stuff rather than buy players on cardboard. Digging a little deeper, though, the prevailing theory here is that the World Cup in 2026 is going to be this sort of moment where there's a supply and demand shock. Ultimately, a lot of people look at it and say, well, demand is going to skyrocket because, of course, World Cup in America. America loves cards. They're going to buy a ton of soccer cards. I'm going to have the soccer cards. So they're going to buy them from me, and thus I can sort of do as I please with that. I understand where that comes from, and, personally, I think it makes sense. I quite enjoy this meme that I'll go ahead and share now.
To the youngsters, I know you're having fun. I used to have fun myself. But there's something you need to know. Stuff like that? That's a load of crap. That's a load of crap.
Don't usually incorporate memes, but I thought it was relevant because I totally understand. Back whenever I started buying soccer cards in 2020, I sort of had the theory that, World Cup comes around, cards go up. But ultimately, there's so much more at play here than just, World Cup comes on, people buy tons of cards, especially the cards you have. Because ultimately, there is another side of this equation, and that is supply. And supply during the 2022 World Cup went up drastically. To the point where it probably outpaced demand, really. And so just because you have an increase in demand doesn't necessarily mean that everything's going to go up in price. That just isn't the case. So we'll talk about that now. I just have a little preview slide here of the Golden Fire sale of 2022. This was essentially a World Cup auction that was hosted in December, and it was absolutely stacked. As you can see here, most every sale on here was on Golden. Tons of them really, really high price. We'll look at the prices here a bit more in a second, but I mean, tons of cards that you really never see, like this one up here, an out of 5 2014 Messi gold power. You don't see those. Like, you don't see them. I don't even know if one has sold since then, but 2022 World Cup, it was there. A 1/1 Kylian Mbappe, first auto that was ever on card for him. Absolutely an amazing card, at least, even more so at the time. That sold. An out of 10 matchups, Ronaldo and Messi, a BGS 9/5 71 bis, a PSA 10, a gold kaboom. You get the idea. Just tons of amazing cards were being sold, and this was all during that December time frame. And so going on over to the Card Ladder website here, I have sorted between November 30th, 2022 and December 31st, 2022, and how many sales were occurring at the highest prices. And if we just scroll here, you'll see endless sales, like endless sales. Like, look at this. I mean, we started at 70K. Once we hit the 20Ks, though, and 30Ks, it's pretty jam-packed. I mean, I'm scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and it's taking me forever. I mean, you can see how small this scroll wheel is on the side. If I scroll all the way down, we're at 4K, and look at all that in between. I mean, that is just stacked, top to bottom. So many. And, this was also at a time where it seems, at least, that the soccer card space sort of hit its bottom for the most part. I guess we could look at the index here in a second. I'll bring that up. But now if we go to modern day, the last month, what's sold? Yeah, there's been a big sale, but I mean, literally after the first sale, we are already into the 30Ks. And if we just scroll down just a little bit, we're already into basically the single thousands, right? And of course, again, the market may have dipped a little more since then, but you're just not seeing those level of cards. I mean, if they did sell, they're up here. I mean, look, that red Messi, huge card, so it's up here. The PSA 10, the PSA 9, those are up here. But other than that, you don't see the huge cards because they aren't coming up, right? And, comparatively, like we just sort of showed, I mean, out of 5 2014, and out of 10 matchups, a 9/5, a PSA 10, gold kaboom, red, great on-card autos, Holland gold out of 50. I mean, just so many good cards. And, that's exactly my point, is that just because there's more demand, there might be more supply. I mean, there are cards here that were sold that I haven't seen since. I mean, and to be honest, I bought some cards during this time. I feel like I got at really good prices because I haven't seen some of those cards since. And I mean, not these prices. I'm not buying up here, but you get my idea. If we look at the index, soccer is actually one of the ones that's, doing okay recently. If we look at the last 6 months, it's one of the few sports, I guess it's down 0.3%, but no other sports are really doing all that hot. So, relatively good look. If we look at the, all-time sort of graph here, of course, huge boom in 2021 along with the rest of the hobby. It says at least, if you assume that this is sort of a flat line scenario and we just sort of hang out here, then it's saying we bottomed out in October of 2023. That might be true, but part of the problem here is that some of the cards that are in this index that heavily weight this index don't sell all that often. So they may have actually dropped back here, but you're not going to see that, or at least realize those prices until later. So while it says October of 2023 is technically the low, I tend to think it was earlier in 2023, maybe even end of 2022, sort of along the same time frame as all those sales you just saw. I think that seemed to have been the bottom. Again, no clue if this is a bottom, but just generally speaking, looking at what we know, it seems to fit. So getting into some of the good performers, you might just say, well, I mean, yeah, so there's going to be a lot of sales. Okay, well, what if I pick the best guys? What if I pick the people that really pop off at the tournament? How's that going to work? So Messi won the gold ball, and here's a PSA 8 71 bits chart for him. Essentially going into the World Cup, now again, keep in mind, we sort of bottomed around this time, so maybe it's just a more macro sense, but he won the World Cup and got the golden ball, and his price on this PSA 8 did not really move from pre-World Cup to post-World Cup. Now, again, this is a very hyped up card. Everyone, I mean, if you're really into the weeds in soccer, you know this card. And so basically, maybe this isn't the right card. Maybe there are other more niche cards that had a bigger bump, but there might be other more niche cards that didn't. So I'm looking at the cards that people's mind would go to. If you wanted to buy some of the best cards of a player, what would you buy? Now, of course, again, this isn't the best card of the player, but I would say it's the most notable, widely known. So you would think if that, he wins a World Cup, some people would go out and chase this, but it didn't really seem to be the case, at least relative to the amount of people that came out and sold it. Silver Ball, looking at Mbappe here, I picked his 2018 World Cup Prism Blue. I figured France kit, World Cup winning year, Prism, a lot of things people would tend to enjoy, and especially newcomers that are coming into soccer. What would they know? They'd probably know this card, and, sure, he didn't win the World Cup, but essentially he set himself up to be the all-time top World Cup scorer if he continues at even a decent clip. And had an amazing final, got to the finals, and this card went down 28% or 26%. Finally, we have Modric. This is an example here. Now, to be fair, I did extend this graph out just another month to sort of see if it held up at all or how that played out. And basically, as you can see, well, back then, before the World Cup, it was selling for 50. During the World Cup, when Croatia was sort of running a bit, it went up to 100, and then next sale post-World Cup was basically back down to normal. So sure, you might be able to double your money on a niche player that hits it big during the World Cup, but you have to capitalize on that hype, it seems, or else it's just going to dissipate and you're back to where you started. All that to say, we just looked at the top 3 performers, and yeah, sure, Modric had a little bit of a spike, but generally speaking, nothing really happened. I think a big problem that we face too with soccer is what cards are going to be in demand. It's essentially kids in a candy store where there are cards everywhere of these players with no real guidelines. There's no real guardrails in soccer. Since it's relatively new, there aren't, specific sets, specific years, specific things that everyone sort of knows to go after or knows are going to hold a premium over everything else. So ultimately, even if you come in and are excited about a player and want to buy some cards, you're almost just going to buy a random card. You're not going to be able to predict what these people are going to buy more than likely. And to continue that theme, the difficulty with singles in soccer is so much higher than every other sport. Say, for instance, baseball. I mean, once you go in there, it's either Topps or Bowman. When you go into basketball, at least recently, people love Prism. Before that, probably Topps Chrome. I mean, there are sort of these sets that people understand and will chase after. And to be honest, back in the day, there weren't tons of parallels. I mean, there were base cards and maybe a few parallels. Nowadays, there's tens, if not hundreds, in total for a single player in a single year. And so for me, I'm 4 years into learning about soccer cards and the singles and really taking a wide approach to all this. And I still have so much to learn. I mean, there is so much to take in, and that's coming from someone who, I spend a lot of time learning about soccer. I go through all the PWCC auctions, I talk about it on here, I get all the info I can from you guys, I chat with other collectors. There is so much, and even 4 to 5 years in at this point, I still am going to have to do this so much longer to even get to where I want to be, and even then, there will always be so much more. So, case being that if you are a newcomer, you're just absolutely lost, and that's okay, but we can't predict what they're going to do. To go along with that, practically all new entrants pick different cards or sets, especially if you look the last couple years. A lot of the people that have gotten into soccer, if you try to make sense of what they're collecting, it's almost always something different. Barely ever, unless there are certain sets that the card community is sort of gathered around. Outside of those few particular sets, no one really has a basis for what they're doing. Everyone just sort of picking things at random, certain things they like, and that's great. I think that's a cool thing if you're a collector. But if you are someone that's looking to maybe sell these in the future, or sell them around a World Cup based on some hype, it's going to be very difficult, I believe. Soccer collecting is just so vast that it is incredibly difficult to be able to pinpoint what people are going to desire, and for that reason, I feel like that makes this so much more difficult. And finally, understanding what a player's best card is has never been harder, in any sport, to be honest, with the amount of parallels and the amount of sets that are coming out, but especially in soccer where, cards are printed all over the world for these players. There's so many different sets, parallels, this, that, and the other that it's just so confusing. I challenge people to do that. If you are collecting a player, try to put together a list of, say, the player's 10 best cards. You'll find it incredibly difficult. And, doing that is a great thought exercise and really sort of puts it all into perspective. And you might be able to come up with some, but the ones that you come up with might not be the same that others come up with. And so ultimately that's sort of the point, is that it's just so difficult to predict singles, especially in ultra modern. Along the same lines, I think that singles evolution in terms of collecting or entering the soccer space typically starts off here on the left, where you have this sort of shotgun approach and someone's buying everything and anything just because they like it, they're excited about the space, they sort of have this newfound joy for it all, and totally understandable. Over time, maybe you start to get a bit more precise, but generally still pretty skewed. And then as you're here longer and longer, you'll typically sort of hone in your range of what you're collecting, and it'll look a lot more cohesive, like something, say, here on the right-hand side. However, that takes time and is not easy, as we've talked about. And so don't get me wrong, this isn't to say that, soccer isn't going to get bigger in America. This isn't going to say that 2026 isn't going to be beneficial for soccer cards in totality. Here I have up on screen the stats of millions of viewers in the U.S. cumulatively per year based on World Cup. As you can see, the World Cup in the United States in 1994, we don't have prior stats, and to be honest, it probably would have been pretty low, I could guess. I would say probably 30, 40 mil, maybe somewhere around there, optimistically. And before that, even less, since 1990 was our first time back in a long time. But looking here, 145 mil viewers, but keep in mind, we didn't reach that again until 2006. So just because we had one big year doesn't mean that they're all going to stick around for the next one. As you can see, it dropped about half and sort of had a lull for a couple World Cups. And I could expect the same sort of thing this go around. Maybe it'll be massive. We will gain viewers in totality, but you also will have a lot of those sort of, fly-by-night guys go on the wayside and go back to doing whatever they were doing. Now, ultimately, as you can see, going down further and further, it's bigger than it's ever been. 300 mil cumulative viewers in the last World Cup, or 2 World Cups ago in 2018. So I'd expect that number to be massive this go around. Maybe, I don't even know. It's going to be hard to predict, but you'd say like 400 or 500 mil, something like that probably, because it'd be more than this, and it would go up quite a bit. So, I'm almost 3 times what it was in 1994, so that's pretty good in terms of growth. But at the same time, does that mean they're going to come in and buy your soccer cards? I don't know. I'll share a really good example of influencers, or even, just general people in the space coming into soccer as the World Cup comes, and then quickly leaving and really having nothing to do with it. So if we look here, this is Mojo Sports. He's a big sort of card influencer guy. And basically, as you can see, wasn't posting anything about soccer, can't even find a soccer post, can't find him wearing a soccer jersey. World Cup comes around, and here we have him, all decked out in U.S. stuff, saying waited 8 years for this, let's go, hype. Post about it there. He posts this Eminence card with Pulisic and Landon Donovan. Then he posts this Neymar, I think watching the Croatia Brazil game, and essentially, posting the card, really excited. And then Neymar and Brazil get knocked out in the World Cup, and this was the meme he posted, which was him holding the card, or in theory holding the card. He was excited when Neymar scored. Once Neymar ends up going out of the tournament, basically looking at the card in disgust and doesn't care about it at all. And, I think that that's very indicative of how a lot of the, American new entrants will sort of feel. They might be excited for a few weeks, but that will quickly dissipate. As you can see here, he posts another Christian Pulisic still in December. And then after that, you see the odd and end soccer card. He's wearing the jersey for a little bit. But if we keep scrolling, very quickly, no more soccer. A month later, no more soccer, can't find a soccer card. And I don't think I've seen him even post one since here. If we just kept scrolling, I don't think there's ever a soccer card posted after that. Case in point for me, I came into the World Cup around right here, 2014 Brazil. 291 mil viewers, huge jump up over 2010. I actually watched a little bit at 2010, but I didn't really follow the U.S. team or anything. I just casually watched random games and remember hearing the vuvuzelas and just being like, what is this, 2014, I worked at a sports bar whenever I was in high school, and the World Cup was on, and so I ended up watching it every single game we had, and it was great. I loved it and basically fell in love. But, just because I watched the World Cup in 2014 didn't mean I was going out and buying cards in 2014. It took until 2020 for me to come in and start buying soccer cards, and then a few more years after that to even start buying meaningful soccer cards that are, in a grand scheme of things, much more important. And so it's a process. sort of building on that, just because popularity gains does not mean that cards go up in value. It's sort of a false equivalency. We have the definition here, drawing an equivalence between two subjects because they share some of the same characteristics while ignoring the significant differences between them. Apples and oranges must taste the same. After all, they're both fruits and round in shape and look pretty similar in terms of their form. Of course, colors are different, this, that, and the other, but basically the case in point is that just because soccer gains popularity does not mean that soccer cards gain popularity to the same degree. You would think that'd be very easy to understand because soccer is the most popular sport in the world, yet soccer cards in general aren't cared about really in the slightest. To sort of show that, here I have the gem rate data on cards submitted to PSA over the last 30 days. This green arrow points to this small segment right here, which is soccer. Soccer, again, despite being the biggest sport in the world, takes up this small little sliver of this huge pie. And yes, when 2026 comes around, I'd imagine this sliver expands. But how far? That's a real question that I don't think anyone can truly answer, but I would say I don't think it's going to be as far as maybe some others would hope. And here we have TCGs, sort of the big piece. We then have baseball, basketball, and football, and then we have hockey. Hockey, we're typically pretty close with hockey, but hockey's going through this time where they have, a generational star potentially, so they're grading a lot of hockey at the moment. Typically, we're around the same spot as hockey, if not maybe a little higher, but right now we aren't. Ultimately, I think that we probably overtake non-sport, although non-sport, who knows between then and now what happens, I'm not sure. But I think we can overtake hockey. I feel pretty good about that. But once you start looking at these other three, I mean, baseball, basketball, football, those are massively bigger than we are. And I don't really think we can, And so, yeah, I think that there's room to grow. I think that there's tons of space for soccer to gain more collectors and to get bigger as time goes on. But just because we gain some collectors does not mean that they're going to go back 3 to 5 years and buy the particular cards that you're buying. And we all have to understand that. Ultimately, where I stand, short term, I think it could be a little doom and gloom. I think that going into the World Cup, this time around, there probably won't be as much hype because last go around, we were still coming off the highs of COVID and people being all excited about that. So I think we sort of had a lot of built-in hype or people trying to find that next thing that might not happen this time. And I think that, again, just because people watch sport doesn't mean they're going to fall right into it immediately. So it could be, sort of a pessimistic time. Now, I think that could also easily be countered by the growth of new collectors, and it could be, pretty exciting. I would imagine 2026 will be a fun time for soccer and soccer in the US, but I don't know if that translates to cards well. Ultimately, I do think, though, long-term, I have my rose-tinted glasses on. I think that long-term, this is probably one of the best sports to collect in terms of, for me, I can buy some of the best cards of some of the best players all time right now. When in comparison, if I wanted to buy some of the best players of just U.S. sports, I really couldn't do it, especially their best cards. I'm nowhere near. So for me, I much enjoy it. I think that there's a lot of upside, at least relative to other sports. And I think that the downside, we're already basically nothing in the pool of sports card collectors. So maybe we turn into more of nothing. I don't know. Ultimately, every card can go to zero, but point being, you're risking a lot less when you buy a soccer card compared to if you bought, say a good baseball card, a good basketball card, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, that's going to be it for the warning of the 2026 World Cup. Again, I'm an optimistic guy generally speaking, but I do want to sort of balance the scales here since I feel like more people are going to be optimistic heading into this rather than pessimistic. And I thought it'd be, an interesting video. So let me know your thoughts down below in a comment. Would love to hear them. If you want to see more videos like this as soon as I go live, make sure to subscribe. And with that said, hopefully you have a wonderful day and peace.